Tonight calls for peace after the collapse of a week-long truce in the Israel-Hamas war. Renewed concerns about civilian suffering as fighting intensifies in Gaza.
Everything in Gaza is at a breaking point.
At global climate talks, a plan for the planet.
The clock is no longer just ticking, it is banging.
Canada signs on to renewables and reactors.
You can't get to net zero without some nuclear.
Plus calling foul on a storied sports magazine.
I find it quite concerning to see the use of fake authors.
An illustration of artificial intelligence in journalism.
CTV National News with Heather Butts. Reporting tonight, John Ehrlichman.
Good evening. The Israeli military has ramped up airstrikes in Gaza after the collapse of a fragile week-long truce between Israel and Hamas. Bombings intensified today in southern Gaza, where most of the region's residents are living in crowded spaces. And residents in several Palestinian border towns were ordered to leave their homes, a possible preparation for a ground invasion. The intense attacks are renewing concerns about civilian deaths, with international mediators urging both sides to consider another pause in fighting. CTV's Jeremy Sharon starts us off tonight.
Rockets light up the night sky in Gaza once again, just a day after the ceasefire collapsed. This morning, smoke smothered the strip. On the ground, Israeli troops continue their invasion. Operations have expanded in southern Gaza, while northern targets are still being hit as well. In Jabalia, dozens were killed after a strike hit Gaza's largest refugee camp today. You killed our children. Where are our children? This Palestinian man said. At least 200 Palestinians have been killed since the fighting resumed, according to Palestinian health officials.
The situation is dire, and with the resumption of fighting, it is catastrophic. The numbers of children that will be killed and injured will continue to skyrocket.
Israel's military says it has hit more than 400 Hamas targets over the last day. Displaced Gazans here in Khan Yunis say they don't know where to go. There is no safe place in Gaza, this woman says, neither in the north nor in the south.
People are living in constant fear of violent death. People are struggling to survive with now, again, little food and water.
As we move in now to crush Hamas, we will in parallel continue to facilitate humanitarian support for the people of Gaza.
The Palestinian Red Crescent says more than 100 aid trucks entered Gaza today through the Rafah border crossing, including 3 carrying 150,000 liters of fuel. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, thousands gathered at this rally. This release hostage joined the calls to free those still being held, including her son. Now, both sides have blamed each other for the negotiation breakdown and the resumption of the war. Today, Benjamin Netanyahu said talks have reached a dead end and his negotiators have been recalled. John?
All right, thanks, Jeremy. And the resumption of fighting sparked more protest activity across Canada today.
We are all Palestinians.
In Halifax, demonstrators called for an end to the conflict.
We need to preach for peace and stopping the killing of the kids and everyone, not only Palestinian kids, but all kids in the world.
Similar rallies were also held in Winnipeg and Toronto. Some of the world's biggest energy producers pledged today to take more steps in the fight against global warming. Oil companies tried to find common ground with political leaders at a major climate summit. The gathering has also pushed the Canadian conversation on that onto the world stage. Here's CTV's Colton Prale.
The framework will be, I'd be shocked if it wasn't presented by the end of this conference.
In Dubai, Canada's environment minister hinting that the framework for a cap on carbon emissions in the oil and gas sector will be announced before the end of COP28.
But it's not enough.
It's a promise that stretches back to the same conference 2 years ago. Now the Liberals seemingly ready to deliver.
That it tackles pollution without infringing on provincial jurisdiction, and that has meant that it has taken a little bit more time.
Oil and gas leaders say they're opposed to the cap, but understand the need for climate action, pointing to data from 2022 where oil and gas emissions stayed level year over year, even as production increased.
We have to prove that we can decouple emissions growth from production growth. This isn't really about getting off of oil and gas, it's about getting off of emissions.
While emissions from oil and gas have dropped 23% per barrel since 2009, production has increased by 129% and is set to climb even higher over the next 2 years.
What we need to also focus on is a managed phase out of our fossil fuel industry, which remains our biggest source of emissions.
Today, Canada joined more than 20 other countries signing the declaration to triple nuclear energy capacity, committing to supporting the development and construction of nuclear reactors nationally and internationally.
Facts and evidence tell us that you can't get to net zero 2050 without some nuclear.
And while the federal government plans an emissions cap, today 50 of the world's biggest oil producers signed a non-binding pledge to cut the release of methane to near zero by 2030 and stop the routine flaring of natural gas. The Liberals plan to introduce their own regulations around methane emissions before the end of the year. John.
Colton, thanks very much. The higher cost of living is a constant source of stress to many Canadians. And for international students, the looming return of a cap on how many hours they can work is adding to those anxieties. TV's Camille Karamali has more.
Both these tendons are broken.
Harshal Dingra's scars, a reminder of an employer he says exploited him. An international student only allowed to work 20 hours a week back in 2021. He took an under-the-table cash job at a pizza place to work more hours to make ends meet.
These two fingers came in the grinding machine.
Until a workplace injury sidelined him. He wasn't technically on the books, so his employer paid him off, only learning months later he was entitled to thousands of dollars more.
I feel angry because everything happened with such a straight and smiley face. You know, oh, we love you and, here's some cash to get you by.
There are concerns more employers will exploit international students in the new year. Canada is set to bring back the 20 hours per week work limit for international students January 1st, meaning many of them will resort to working additional undocumented hours.
What they're going to be doing is letting employer abuse, rampant wage theft, and mistreatment at work continue for nearly 500,000 people in the country, and nobody wants that.
We're lifting the limit.
A year ago, the feds temporarily removed the weekly work cap until 2024 to address labor shortages. But since then, inflation and housing unaffordability have surged. In Ontario, for example, the minimum wage is $16.55 per hour. Working 20 hours a week, an international student can make just over $1,300 a month. Compare that to the average cost of a studio rental in Toronto, tuition and groceries, the expenses roughly 4 times more than what an international student can make.
Many may face the consequences of being deported simply for working too much.
But a recent Senate report argues the 20-hour limit is crucial in keeping them focused on their studies. Meanwhile, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada would not commit to removing the cap, instead saying it's reviewing the full impact of this policy. John?
Okay, Camille, thank you. Ontario's Liberal Party has selected a new leader.
Ready to take on the challenge. I'm very grateful to my colleagues. We're all in this together.
Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie prevailed after 3 tight rounds of ballots. Crombie, who was the favorite to win, will now lead the party in its fight to take power in the province's 2026 election. It was a close call on the Rideau Canal in Ottawa this morning. A man was rescued from the icy water, and as CTV's Natalie Van Roy reports, paramedics and a Good Samaritan helped save the day.
Ottawa fire officials say a man is alive because of the quick thinking of a bystander who heard his cries for help from the freezing water of the Rideau Canal.
I believe they were just walking down the path and noticed the patient in the water, calling for help.
The emergency unfolding minutes before 6:30 early Saturday.
I'm not sure if they were trying to cross, but obviously people should stay off thin ice at this time of the year. I think it's very dangerous and they should be aware that they could go through it at any time.
Ice is starting to form on the Rideau Canal, which is Ottawa's largest skateway during the winter months. But there's no signs yet of the canal freezing over, and it's not safe to be anywhere near the water. Ottawa fire officials say it's not clear why the man was in the Rideau Canal and whether drugs, alcohol, or a medical condition were factors.
Yeah, so essentially we just used this piece of webbing and
Firefighters quickly performing a rescue as the man went in and out of consciousness.
We got down the ladders, got this piece of webbing that we had, wrapped it around the patient's arms, and created a makeshift body harness.
Hypothermia had already set in, and the man was unable to move his body.
After 10 minutes in the water, the average person will lose all ability to help themselves and won't be able to move on their own. And that's usually what leads to them drowning in cold water. Obviously could not move on their own. We tried to help them to come up our ladder. They couldn't do that on their own either, so we had to basically haul them out using a webbing.
Firefighters and water rescue technicians treated the man at the scene.
Firefighters did an excellent job of assessing and treating the individual, bringing him up the embankment and keeping him warm in the truck.
He was transported to the civic campus of the Ottawa Hospital in critical condition. Natalie Van Roy, CTV News, Ottawa.
Authorities in British Columbia are warning South Coast residents to prepare for heavy rain and snow. A wallop of snow is already blanketing the Coquihalla Highway. The Sea to Sky Highway is also preparing for its first major snowfall of the season, with up to 35 centimeters hitting local mountains. BC is also grappling with drug-related deaths. The number of fatalities has continued to grow since a health emergency was declared 7 years ago. Here's CTV's Isabella Zavarisi on the worries heading into the holidays.
It's the leading cause of death for people between 10 to 59 years old in our province. Overdoses from toxic, unregulated drugs have already claimed more than 2,000 British Columbians' lives in the first 10 months of this year, according to the latest coroner's report.
All people who are using it need to have access to a regulated source, because this toxicity is getting worse and it's going to continue to get worse.
It's so dire in Surrey, the RCMP issued a warning about the toxically laced fentanyl supply. 5 people died from suspected overdoses in just 1 week. The Ministry of Mental Health saying, "Our hearts go out to the families and friends mourning the loss of 189 individuals in October." But advocates are calling for greater political will.
It's not about moral panic. It's about the reality on ground that people are dying due to lack of resources and help. So we have to be more empathetic towards people who use substances.
Which is what groups like Students Overcoming Substance Use Disorders and Addiction, or SOUDA, are trying to do. SOUDA provides culturally relevant and language-specific resources to Surrey's South Asian community. The goal is to bridge a gap between healthcare providers and the public.
Before our group started working on ground, there was no one providing overdose response and prevention training to our community.
Another thing that we have been able to combat a little bit in our South Asian community is the stigma that they used to have about issues like drug addiction and overdose.
And with the holidays around the corner, advocates worry how many more people will grieve.
It's heart-wrenching because I know that there are families out there that will be losing their loved ones. And the Christmas chair at the table will be empty.
Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News, Surrey.
Coming up, calls for solutions to the housing crisis. A public bathroom closure prompts debate over one city's response to homelessness. The doors are back open tonight at a public washroom in a park in Newfoundland's capital city. It follows a week of controversy that saw St. John's shut down the facilities, which were being used by people living in a nearby homeless encampment. Volunteers held a ribbon cutting this morning for 2 porta potties they donated for for the tent city residents to use and to shame the city into action. And today there was action. 3 days after the washrooms closed, a reversal. CTV's Garrett Berry reports.
They call this place Tent City, established on a historic property next to a popular downtown St. John's Park. It's one of the most visible signs of a housing crisis that's ever been seen in this province. And this week, there was another thing they didn't have.
And I had to go all the way to the gathering place. I'm old, I can't hold like I used to.
Officials in St. John's shut down these bathrooms, the only ones in this park, blaming vandalism.
Toilets being stocked with needles, waste on the floor, cleaners, what they had to contend with.
Access to washrooms had already drawn protests.
We took an old toilet down to City Hall, wrapped it in rusty old chains, locked it up, and called out Mayor Breen to come outside and commit to unlocking the washrooms and having 24/7 access, which again is a human right to hygiene.
And with this latest move, emotions just got higher.
I also believe that that's a deliberate attempt to push people out that have nowhere else to go.
This week, the provincial government formed a new task force, and after the controversy, the city did an about-face today, reopening the bathrooms. Across the country, fears for winter are growing. In London, firefighters have now extinguished 3 fires at encampments. 1 woman was injured. A similar story in Toronto, where last weekend, a fire broke out in Kensington Market.
We're having more and more youth coming into our shelter talking about the fact that they've left these encampments because of the safety issues.
Visible homelessness isn't new in Newfoundland and Labrador, but this size, this tent city, shows a housing crisis getting deeper.
In Newfoundland, we pride ourselves as really friendly and really welcoming. So when I look here at Tent City, I just really wonder where that is right now.
Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
Still ahead. Allegations of AI-generated authors at Sports Illustrated send shockwaves through the world of sports journalism. Sports Illustrated and its parent company have been rocked by accusations that the magazine has posted articles by authors who don't exist. The writers were created by artificial intelligence. CTV's Vanessa Lee explains.
The headline is damning. An investigation by science and technology website Futurism found Sports Illustrated published articles by fake AI-generated writers.
I find it quite concerning that to see the use of fake authors in this way, with fake faces and fake bios that, communicate to readers that they might have a certain expertise that they don't actually have.
Futurism says it found at least 6 fake names churning out dozens of articles for the storied brand, including Drew Ortiz. It states he is a product reviews team member and even includes his email address, except he doesn't really exist.
It's AI-generated headshots, and we were able to find every fake person that we were able to find with a headshot attached. We were able to track those headshots to that website where they're available for sale.
Sports Illustrated has since deleted the articles. The Arena Group, which operates the magazine, says they were product reviews, licensed content from an external third-party company, Advon Commerce, adding it is conducting an internal investigation and has ended that partnership.
What is beyond the pale in this case is that it was done with no disclosure. There was no transparency here.
In a statement, the Sports Illustrated union says staff are horrified. If true, these practices violate everything we believe in about journalism. We deplore being associated with something so disrespectful to our readers. SI is the latest media company struggling with AI. American newspaper chain Gannett paused an experiment this summer after botched high school sports articles. The Sports Illustrated union is demanding the company adhere to basic journalistic standards as it braces for a hit to the magazine's celebrated reputation. Vanessa Lee, CTV News, Montreal.
Some of the country's top talent were inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame at a special gala in Toronto.
To be back here tonight celebrating with my family,
You know, it's nice. It's nice to reflect and see how far I've come.
Tell me why gonna make things so complicated.
Pop star Avril Lavigne, funny man Rick Mercer, and hockey superstar Connor McDavid were among the inductees. The Walk of Fame honors notable Canadians for excellence in fields spanning entertainment to humanitarianism. You can catch the whole 25th anniversary broadcast on December 16th on CTV. After the break, from forgotten canvases to the bidding spotlight, art enthusiasts get a rare glimpse of the early work of an iconic maritime painter. Maud Lewis is undeniably one of the biggest figures in maritime art history. But when she started, the Nova Scotia artist was an unknown with just a brush, canvas, and a curiosity about the world in front of her. Now, 3 rare paintings from those early days are up for auction. CTV's Sarah Plowman has more.
A village atop rolling hills, a plow being pulled, a pair of grazing oxen. For decades, these paintings were hidden in a New York home until the owner rediscovered them and reached out to a gallery and auction house in St. John to ask, are these real work by famous folk artist Maud Lewis?
And we were just, we remember getting the email. It was just astonishing to see them.
The owner chose to auction off the art after the gallery and Alan Deacon, who can spot a fake, confirmed the paintings weren't just real, but Lewis's early work from the 1940s.
And it's quite rare to get early works by Maud Lewis. Most of the paintings we see coming to market are really works probably in the last 5 or 6 years of her life.
Lewis had debilitating arthritis and sold her work from her tiny house in rural Nova Scotia. She painted through pain and poverty and died in 1970.
Who told you you could paint fairies on the wall?
Her life inspired a movie a few years ago. That grew her work's appreciation. This piece sold for $350,000. Lewis had sold her own paintings for a few dollars on the side of the road.
Not that it wasn't appreciated, but it didn't have, say, inherent value on the marketplace, did not the kind of, like I said, international presence that she has now. So many of these early works have just been lost or damaged, destroyed, thrown away.
In an online auction that ends Sunday, these rare finds are valued at between $25,000 and $35,000 each.
We've had quite a bit of interest from within Atlantic Canada, but then phone calls from California and from out west and from overseas. So it's, an auction, you never know what will transpire in the final moments.
In what could be a frenzied race to own and display a piece of maritime tranquility. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, St. John.
That's it for us tonight. Heather is back tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thanks for watching. Good night.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.